They'll never admit it out loud, but every person they meet now gets compared to you. Every conversation, every glance, every moment is measured against the way you once made them feel. And every single time, reality disappoints them. Because the truth is simple. You were irreplaceable, and they never realized it until you were gone. They didn't understand your worth when you were right there, loving them effortlessly. They mistook your kindness for abundance, as if people like you grow on trees. They thought they could do better. They thought they could upgrade. But now they're learning the cruelest lesson of all: quality doesn't repeat. They didn't realize your presence was rare. Your empathy, your patience, your loyalty, those things don't come packaged in every new face they chase. Now, every time they try to connect with someone else, the emptiness reminds them of what they threw away. It's a curse they placed on themselves. They wander from person to person, searching for something familiar, something comforting, something powerful, but it never arrives. Because the spark they felt with you wasn't chemistry, it was alignment, destiny, divine timing, and they shattered it with their own hands. They thought moving on would be easy. They thought replacing you would be quick. But now they're drowning in the realization that what you offered came once in a lifetime. And the people they seek now can't even match your shadow. Your silence haunts them. Your absence exposes the cheapness of everything they're settling for now. They can't find your depth in shallow waters. They can't find your strength in fragile hearts. They can't find your authenticity in people who only pretend. You were the standard, and nothing they meet now even comes close. They scroll through contacts, through messages, through memories, hoping something will numb the ache, but nothing does. Because the standard you set wasn't emotional, it was spiritual. You touched places in them they didn't even know existed, and they'll spend years trying to fill those empty spaces. Every new conversation reminds them of your wit. Every argument reminds them of your honesty. Every silence reminds them of your peace. They try to replicate the bond, but all they're doing is chasing ghosts, you being the biggest one. They didn't appreciate how you understood them without explanation. They didn't appreciate how you forgave them before they even apologized. They didn't appreciate the way you knew their flaws and still chose them. Now they're encountering people who won't tolerate even a fraction of what you accepted. And reality hits them hard. You weren't demanding. You were balanced. You weren't clingy. You were loyal. You weren't soft. You were golden. And they treated gold like dust. Now they're left with hands full of sand. They can't replicate the comfort you provided. They can't recreate the peace you brought. They can't revive the magic you naturally radiated. And each disappointment feels like punishment for taking you for granted. Their ego dies a little each time they realize the people they chase now don't stay. They don't invest. They don't care the way you did. Because what you brought to the table wasn't normal, it was exceptional. They thought they were the prize, the catch, the rare one. But losing you showed them the truth. You were the blessing. You were the shift. You were the upgrade. And now they're stuck with the uncomfortable knowledge that they fumbled something extraordinary. They remember the softness of your voice, the way you listened without judgment, the way you made them feel safe, and they know deep down they won't ever experience that combination again. That realization gnaws at them, day after day. They replay your laughter now, realizing how genuine it was. They replay your words, realizing how wise they were. They replay your loyalty, realizing how unwavering it was. And all they can do is wish they had treated you better when they had the chance. You set a bar they can't reach anymore. Not because others aren't good enough, but because the version of them who had access to you no longer exists. They burn that version trying to impress the wrong crowds. Every time they look into someone else's eyes, they search for your fire. Every time someone touches their hand, they look for your warmth. Every time they feel lonely, they crave your presence. But replacements don't heal regret. They're bumping into the consequences of mistaking your love for weakness. They're learning that strong souls don't beg, they move on. And once they move on, no force on earth can bring them back. They didn't just lose a person, they lost a future. Every road they walk now is haunted by the thought of what could have been if they had simply matured, cared, and chosen you properly. The thought follows them like a shadow that never fades. You were the one thing in their life that wasn't temporary. You were the one they could have built an entire world with. But they chose chaos, ego, pride, and now all they're left with is the ache of realizing that you were the safest place they ever had. Time will pass, years will shift, people will come and go, but the memory of you will stay carved into the back of their mind like a scar they gave themselves. They'll forget faces, forget names, forget moments, but they'll never forget you. Because you weren't just someone they loved. You were the standard, the blueprint, the bar no one else can reach. And that is the punishment life gives to those who mishandle rare souls. They will search for you in everyone and never find you again. They didn't realize that once someone experiences a presence like yours, every connection after feels half awake. That's why they wander through people like someone flipping through static channels, waiting for a signal that feels like what you effortlessly were. But the truth is simple, they won't find it. Not because others aren't good enough, but because what you brought wasn't something that can be copied, mimicked, or manufactured. It was born from who you are, not from what you did. They replay your conversations in their mind now, trying to understand how you carried so much weight with so few words, how your silence said more than other people's paragraphs, how your presence felt like a mirror and a challenge at the same time. They didn't appreciate it when they had it because they assumed you'd always stay. But losing you taught them the language of emptiness, and its fluency they never wanted. They sit with the realization that they didn't upgrade when they left, you did. While they tried to find someone easier, more predictable, more bendable, you became someone stronger, colder, wiser. You grew in ways they'll never be able to understand. And now you're the version of yourself they always hoped you wouldn't become, the one who doesn't need them at all. Their mistake wasn't treating you badly. Their mistake was treating you badly while assuming you'd never change. They believed your kindness was dependence. They believed your patience was weakness. They believed your effort was lack of options. And now they're learning the most painful truth. You were never the one who needed them. They were the one who needed you. They scroll through people's faces, hoping something sparks the familiarity you once gave them without trying. But nothing lands. Nothing sticks. Nothing feels real. Because you weren't just a person, you were a standard, a level, a league they never earned but were lucky enough to touch. And now that you're gone, they walk through their days comparing everyone to a memory they ruined. They remember the way you made them feel seen, understood, valued, and challenged. They remember the way you encouraged their growth even when they didn't appreciate it. They remember the way you corrected them with respect, not humiliation. They remember the way you carried yourself with quiet strength. And now, they realize that those qualities aren't normal, they were rare, priceless, almost impossible to find again. They finally understand why people say you don't meet someone like that twice. Because someone like you isn't a coincidence, you're a turning point. And they treated a turning point like a temporary stop. That's why they're stuck now emotionally, mentally, spiritually, because the moment they mishandled you, their story stopped progressing. They replay the details of your presence like a movie they didn't know would become their favorite until it was too late. The way you listened, the way you spoke, the way you noticed things others always overlooked, the way you carried dignity even when disrespected, the way you never needed loudness to make an impact. They missed the subtlety of you, the depth of you, the steadiness of you. And the scariest part for them is knowing they'll never experience it again. Others come with noise, drama, insecurity, and expectations they can't meet. With you, everything felt elevated not because you tried, but because your energy carried a weight that commanded sincerity. They left thinking they'd find better. They come back realizing they'll only find busier, louder, needier, not better. Now they understand why your absence is louder than your presence ever had to be. Because when someone loses a standard, everything becomes a downgrade. And no matter who they date, who they chase, who they settle for, none of them can offer what you did. Authenticity without performance, depth without chaos, love without conditions. You laughed not because it was funny, but because it was finally predictable. Their betrayal didn't hit you like a surprise. It landed exactly where you expected it to. And that laugh, that quiet, sharp exhale of disbelief, that's what shook them. They wanted to see you crumble, break, panic. Instead, you smirked like someone who already knew how the story would end. You laughed because their betrayal confirmed everything you already suspected. The patterns, the inconsistencies, the sudden switches in tone, it all made sense. Betrayal wasn't a plot twist. It was the last missing puzzle piece. And when you finally placed it, the picture was so clear it made you laugh at how obvious it had been. You laughed because they genuinely thought they were smart enough to fool you. They underestimated you so deeply that it became comedic. They believed their little schemes were invisible. But you saw every move, every slip-up, every crack in their mask. You laughed because their betrayal wasn't clever, it was clumsy. You laughed because you had already detached long before they made their move. The betrayal didn't injure your heart. It only confirmed the exit you'd already decided on internally. You weren't heartbroken, you were validated. And nothing terrifies a betrayer more than seeing the person they tried to wound standing calm and unshaken. You laughed because pain was what they expected, tears were what they anticipated, anger was what they were prepared to deal with. But laughter? Laughter meant they never had the power they thought they did. Laughter meant their betrayal was too small to matter. Laughter meant they failed. You laughed because their betrayal was almost pathetic. You saw how much effort they put into hurting you, and for what? To create a story where they felt powerful for once? To get a reaction that would feed their ego? Instead, you responded with the one thing their ego couldn't swallow: indifference coated in humor. You laughed because you saw the irony. They betrayed someone who had no intention of harming them. They stabbed a heart that only ever showed them warmth. They burned a bridge you were already done crossing. The whole situation became so absurd, the only response left was laughter. You laughed because betrayal reveals character, and their character was nothing but insecurity dressed in manipulation. You realized they didn't betray you because you were weak. They betrayed you because your strength made them feel disposable. That realization alone was worth a laugh. You laughed because, in that moment, you saw their true fear. They expected your world to fall apart. Instead, it was theirs that cracked. Because when you smiled at their betrayal, they realized they miscalculated you entirely. They weren't dealing with the version of you they thought they were dealing with, the version they accidentally created. You laughed because they showed their hand too early. Their intentions slipped, their ulterior motives leaked, and the moment the truth surfaced, you realized how little their presence meant in your life. It's always easier to laugh when the game ends exactly how you predicted. You laughed because it hurt them more than any confrontation ever could. They wanted drama, chaos, tears, some performance that proved how deeply you cared. Instead, you simply walked away laughing, leaving them with a silence they couldn't interpret, couldn't control, couldn't escape. You laughed because you knew something they didn't. You always bounced back stronger. Their betrayal didn't weaken you. It refined you. It sharpened you. And that inner glow of resilience, it terrified them more than your anger ever would. You laughed because their betrayal freed you from illusions, from false loyalty, from unnecessary attachments. Sometimes betrayal is the last push you need to step into your higher self. Once the weight of their presence fell off, all you could do was laugh at how long you carried it. You laughed because you realized how small they truly were in the big picture of your life. You once placed them on a pedestal only to discover they weren't even worthy of the first step. Betrayal didn't shrink you, it shrank them. That alone was amusing. You laughed because it was the last emotion you needed to close the chapter, a moment of clarity disguised as a chuckle, a release, a signal to yourself that you no longer cared enough to hurt, hate, or hold on. You laughed because you saw the panic in their eyes. Betrayers expect revenge, not composure. They expect destruction, not dignity. Your laugh told them you were past the point of emotional negotiation. And when someone stops negotiating, they're unreachable. You laughed because their betrayal was a reflection of them, not you. You didn't fail as a person, they just revealed who they had been all along. And that truth was almost comical in its predictability. You laughed because you knew you'd come out better, cleaner, stronger. People who betray lose something they never get back: access. And there is no revenge more powerful than permanent inaccessibility. You laughed because deep down, they wanted to matter. They wanted their betrayal to be a turning point in your life. And realizing it barely scratched your surface destroyed the fantasy they'd built in their own mind. You laughed because they expected closure, maybe even forgiveness, but your laughter was the closure. Your silence after that was the consequence, and your departure was the lesson. You laughed because you didn't need to explain anything. The betrayal explained everything for you. Their actions spoke louder than any apology could. Their choices wrote the ending for both of you. You laughed because you no longer had any emotional connection left to protect. The betrayal killed the last pieces of attachment, so your laugh was the sound of the final bond breaking cleanly. You laughed because you knew karma had already taken your side. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need to expose them. Life has a way of returning people the energy they give out, and you knew exactly what was coming for them. You laughed because they were the ones who would live with regret, not you. They ruined something rare. They destroyed someone who genuinely cared. And now that you're gone, the full weight of that loss sits on their chest. You laughed because, in the end, you won. Not through retaliation, not through cruelty, but through the power of walking away untouched while they stood trembling, realizing the truth. You kept laughing because their betrayal didn't end you, it ended the illusion you once held of them. That freedom, that clarity, that sudden removal of emotional weight, it felt almost divine. And that terrified them, because your liberation meant their importance was nothing but a fading shadow. You laughed because you finally understood the truth. They betrayed you not because you were weak, but because you were strong in all the ways they wished they could be. Your loyalty, your patience, your heart, all the traits they lacked made them envious. They couldn't handle standing next to someone who naturally outshined them. You laughed because their attempt to hurt you was the loudest confession of their insecurity. People who feel secure don't sabotage those who love them. Only the broken destroy what they cannot match. And once you realized that, their betrayal became nothing but a sad little performance. You laughed because you realized they expected you to fight for them. They wanted you to beg, plead, scream. But the moment you laughed instead, they realized they meant so little that you didn't even bother to resist. Nothing bruises a betrayer's ego more than realizing they weren't worth a reaction. You laughed because in that moment, you saw exactly who you were becoming: someone wiser, colder, more powerful. Pain didn't turn you into a victim, it turned you into a strategist. Betrayal didn't break you, it awakened a version of you they were never prepared to meet. You laughed because you could finally see your worth reflected in their regret. They didn't expect you to rise, they didn't expect you to detach so effortlessly. Watching you thrive without them shattered the fantasy they'd built that you needed them. And the irony? You were always the one holding everything together. You laughed because they finally understood the value of what they lost. All the care, patience, and loyalty you gave them, qualities they took for granted, became priceless the moment you withdrew them. Betrayal taught you to stop giving, and that lesson hit them harder than anything you could have said. You laughed because their betrayal exposed their entire character, not the version they pretended to be, but the one they hid from the world. Cowardly, insecure, desperate for validation. Once you saw that truth, it was impossible to ever fear them again. You laughed because the universe repaid them faster than you ever could. Life brought them consequences disguised as circumstances. Every lie, every manipulation, every disrespect, it all circled back. And you, untouched by vengeance, simply laughed as karma did what you never needed to. You laughed because you knew they would return. Betrayers always do, not for forgiveness, but for access. And that access, gone forever. Your laughter was the seal on the door they could never enter again. They're running now. That's the funny part. Not laughing funny truth is ugly funny. The kind of funny that crawls under your skin and makes you smile when you shouldn't. Your haters, the loud ones, the sneaky ones, the ones who lived off your reactions like parasites live off blood, they're backing away slowly, hands up, eyes wide, whispering the same excuse to each other. You're too dangerous now. Dangerous. Not because you scream, not because you threaten, not because you fight, but because you don't need them anymore. Once upon a time, they loved you predictable. They loved you emotional. They loved you explainable. They loved knowing which button to press to get which reaction. They thrived on your effort, your justifications, your need to be understood. That was the playground where they felt brave. That was where they talked the most. And now, the playground is empty. And they're standing at the edge, wondering when you stopped needing the game. They call you dangerous because you broke the unspoken contract. The contract said you'd always respond, always react, always care enough to defend yourself, always stay in the noise long enough for them to feel important. You didn't sign that contract consciously, but the moment you tore it up, they felt it like a punch to the throat. See, haters don't fear strength. They fear clarity. Strength can be challenged. Clarity can't be argued with. You don't debate anymore. You don't correct narratives. You don't chase misunderstandings. You let people believe whatever keeps them comfortable, and that terrifies them. Because comfort built on lies collapses fast when truth stops cooperating. They say you're dangerous because you don't flinch when they try to provoke you. They throw old insults, recycled stories, exaggerated versions of you like broken records, hoping something sticks. Nothing does. And silence? Silence drives insecure people insane. You used to absorb hits like it was your job. You thought being strong meant enduring. You thought maturity meant explaining. You thought growth meant staying polite even when disrespected. That version of you was useful to everyone except you. Now you've learned something that makes people nervous. You don't need to prove who you are to people committed to misunderstanding you. That's when the word dangerous entered their vocabulary. They used to laugh at you. Now they whisper. They used to confront you. Now they avoid eye contact. They used to mock your calm. Now they're unsettled by it. Because calm that doesn't come from fear but from self-trust feels like standing next to a loaded weapon that doesn't announce itself. You're not loud anymore. You're certain. You're not reactive anymore. You're selective. You're not trying to win. You're done competing. And when someone stops competing, the people who built their identity on rivalry start panicking. Your haters are running because they can't get a read on you. They don't know what you'll tolerate. They don't know where your line is. They don't know what matters to you anymore. Mystery scares people who survive by predictability. They keep saying you changed, like it's an accusation, like growth is a crime, like self-respect is betrayal. What they really mean is, you stopped making it easy for us. You became dangerous the moment you realized your attention was currency and stopped handing it out for free. They try to paint you as cold, arrogant, detached. They need labels because labels make fear manageable. But deep down, they know the truth. You're not cold. You're contained. You're not arrogant. You're unavailable. You're not detached. You're finished. Finished arguing with people who don't listen. finished explaining to people who twist words, finished shrinking so others feel tall. Your haters are running because you're no longer feeding the version of them that felt powerful. They don't get to feel superior when you don't respond. They don't get to feel clever when you don't engage. They don't get to feel victorious when you don't fight back. You didn't defeat them. You outgrew the battlefield. That's the part they don't recover from. They thought being cruel made them strong. They thought manipulation was intelligence. They thought control meant dominance. And then you walked away without rage, without revenge, without spectacle, and showed them how empty their tactics really were. Now they're left with nothing but each other. And that's a lonely place to be when all you know how to do is tear people down. They say you're dangerous because you're no longer accessible. Access was their leverage. Access was how they gathered information, tested limits, planted doubt. You closed the door without slamming it, and that quiet closure echoes louder than any argument ever did. You don't announce boundaries anymore. You enforce them by absence. That's advanced. That's grown. That's terrifying to people who rely on chaos. They used to poke you to see how much you'd take. Now they're afraid to poke at all, because they've seen what happens when you stop caring, and it wasn't explosive. It was final. Final scares people more than anger ever could. Anger can be calmed. Anger can be manipulated. Anger still cares. Indifference? Indifference doesn't negotiate. Your haters are running because you don't give them stories anymore. No emotional breakdowns. No public reactions. No messy explanations. You deny them content. And people who live for drama can't survive without an audience. They're calling you dangerous because they feel exposed. When you stopped reacting, they lost their camouflage. Their behavior looks ugly without your emotional responses to distract from it. Their words sound hollow without your engagement to give them weight. You didn't change the rules. You stopped playing. They don't know how to deal with someone who doesn't need validation, approval, or revenge. They don't understand peace that isn't performative. They don't recognize power that doesn't announce itself. So they do the only thing insecure people do when faced with something they can't control. They run. They whisper. They warn others about you. Careful, they say. They're different now. And they're right. You are different, not because you became ruthless, but because you became rooted. Rooted in self-trust. Rooted in discernment. Rooted in knowing who deserves access and who doesn't. You don't hate your haters. Hate would require energy you no longer waste. You don't even want revenge. Revenge would mean they still matter. What you want and what you chose is distance. Distance is lethal to people who survive on proximity. They're running because they can't manipulate someone who sees patterns instead of excuses. They can't gaslight someone who trusts their memory. They can't intimidate someone who's already walked through worse alone. They used to call you weak because you were kind. Now they call you dangerous because you're kind to yourself first. That switch rewires everything. They can't bait you with insults. They can't guilt you with history. They can't scare you with threats of exclusion. You've already excluded yourself from nonsense. Your haters are running because you've become ungovernable. Not rebellious, not chaotic, ungovernable. You don't respond to pressure, you don't bend under noise, you don't rush to explain. You let silence do the talking. Silence reveals who needs control. Silence exposes who needs reaction. Silence shows who never had substance to begin with. They're running because they know you see them clearly now. And being seen by someone who doesn't fear you is unbearable for people built on illusions. They used to think they were above you. Now they're not sure where they stand, and uncertainty humbles even the loudest mouths. You intimidate them because you're not impressed. You intimidate them because you don't chase. You intimidate them because you're not available for their version of reality. And the funniest part, the darkest joke of all, is that you didn't have to do anything extreme to become this person. You just stopped betraying yourself. You stopped over-explaining. You stopped tolerating disrespect. You stopped confusing endurance with strength. And suddenly the same people who mocked your softness are warning others about your presence. Careful, they say again. They're not the same. No, you're not. You're calmer, sharper, quieter, more selective. And that combination is lethal to egos built on chaos. Your haters are running because they can't reach you emotionally anymore. They can't provoke guilt. They can't trigger doubt. They can't lure you back into old dynamics. You've become the one thing they can't defeat. Someone who doesn't need to win. They'll keep talking. They'll keep exaggerating. They'll keep framing your boundaries as hostility. Let them. Stories are all they have left. You're too busy living. They say you're dangerous because danger is what power looks like to people who've never had any of their own. And here's the truth they'll never admit, even to themselves. You didn't become dangerous to them. You became immune. Immune to manipulation. Immune to projection. Immune to disrespect dressed up as humor. Immune to chaos disguised as connection. That immunity feels like death to people who fed on your reactions. So they run. Let them. Because the moment people who tried to break you start fearing you, you know one thing for certain. You didn't lose yourself. You found yourself. And that, to the wrong people, is the most dangerous thing you could ever do. They're shocked. That's the part that keeps them awake at night. Not angry, not confused, shocked. Because in their mind, history was a safety net. History was insurance. History was proof that no matter what they did, you'd hesitate, you'd pause, you'd remember, you'd soften. They built their confidence on the length of time they had access to you, not realizing that time only matters when respect survives it. They believed history guaranteed permanence. They believed shared memories were chains strong enough to keep you tied, even when things turned ugly. They thought laughter from the past could excuse disrespect in the present. They thought effort from yesterday could cancel betrayal today. They were wrong. And that realization hit them all at once like a door slammed shut in a quiet room. What shocks them isn't that you left. It's how you left. No buildup. No speeches. No dramatic final fight. Just a clean cut, a blink. A moment where they still thought they had time and suddenly they didn't. They replay it over and over, searching for warning signs. There were none they wanted to see. You didn't threaten to leave. You didn't beg for change. You didn't weaponize the past. You observed, you measured, you decided. And when the decision was made, you didn't drag it out for comfort. That's what unsettles them. People expect exits to be loud, messy, emotional. They expect tears, explanations, breakdowns. Those things reassure them that they mattered, that the bond was real, that the separation hurts you too. Your exit gave them none of that. It was efficient, controlled, final. They ask themselves how someone could walk away from so much history so fast. They don't understand that you didn't walk away from the history, you walked away from the pattern. History wasn't erased, it was evaluated. And when it no longer justified the present, it lost its power. They thought shared struggle created immunity. They thought loyalty once given was permanent. They mistook endurance for obligation. You showed them something they never learned. Staying too long can be more damaging than leaving quickly. The truth is, you didn't cut them off in a blink. You cut them off after 1,000 quiet realizations they never noticed. After moments where you chose peace over confrontation. After times you stayed silent instead of explaining. After watching the same behaviors repeat while promises changed shape but never substance. The blink they saw was just the moment the door closed. They never saw the slow walk toward it. They're shocked because they assumed familiarity gave them unlimited access. They assumed knowing your past meant they could predict your future. They assumed your capacity to forgive meant you lacked the capacity to leave. They were wrong on all counts. History made them comfortable, too comfortable. Comfortable enough to stop trying, comfortable enough to test boundaries, comfortable enough to believe you'd always choose the relationship over yourself. When you didn't, their entire framework collapsed. They feel betrayed by your decisiveness. That's the irony. They frame your self-respect as cruelty because it disrupts the version of events where they were always safe from consequences. They say, after everything we've been through, as if survival together grants permission to cause harm later. What they don't say but feel deeply is fear. Fear that if history wasn't enough to keep you, then nothing is guaranteed. Fear that relationships aren't secured by time but by behavior. Fear that access is conditional, not owed. They thought they knew you. They knew the patient you, the forgiving you, the version that stayed and explained and hoped. They didn't know the you who could detach cleanly once clarity arrived. That version scares them because it means you were always capable of leaving, you just chose not to before. Your cut wasn't emotional. It was administrative, like closing a file that no longer serves its purpose. That's what makes it sting. If you had left in rage, they could dismiss it as impulsive. If you had left in tears, they could believe you'd come back. You left in certainty. Certainty doesn't reverse itself. They try to remind you of memories, inside jokes, milestones. They don't realize those things aren't leverage anymore. Memories don't override disrespect. Nostalgia doesn't fix broken dynamics. The past doesn't get to bully the present. They're shocked because you didn't negotiate your exit. You didn't ask for reassurance. You didn't ask for closure. You decided closure was leaving. That level of self-trust feels cold to people who rely on emotional bargaining. They accuse you of being heartless. What they really mean is unreachable. They accuse you of being sudden. What they really mean is resolved. They accuse you of forgetting everything. What they really mean is you remembered yourself. They never expected you to choose self-respect over shared history. That choice rewrote the meaning of everything you went through together. It told them the bond wasn't unconditional, it was mutual. And once mutuality died, so did access. They're shocked because you didn't punish them. You didn't argue your case. You didn't try to make them understand. You simply removed yourself. Removal is the quietest consequence and the most permanent. They thought time invested meant sunk cost. They didn't realize time invested is also time learned. You learned what patterns look like. You learned what doesn't change. You learned how much of yourself you were giving away to keep things alive. And when learning outweighs attachment, leaving becomes simple. They keep asking how you could switch so fast. You didn't switch. You stopped pretending. Pretending takes energy. Clarity doesn't. What shocks them most is that you didn't hesitate publicly. You didn't ask others for validation. You didn't announce your departure. You moved privately, confidently, without seeking permission. That level of independence feels like betrayal to people who expected emotional dependence. They assumed you needed them as much as they needed you. That illusion died the moment you left without collapsing. Seeing you stable without them forced them to confront an uncomfortable truth. The relationship meant more to them as control than to you as survival. They feel erased, not because you forgot them, but because you removed them from your future. Being absent from someone's future hurts more than being criticized in their present. It means the story continues and they're not in it. They tell themselves you're cold now, that you're ruthless, that you're changed. These stories protect their ego from the reality that you simply stopped accepting what you once tolerated. Growth always looks like cruelty to those who benefited from your lack of boundaries. They thought history was a leash. You proved it was a lesson. They're shocked because you didn't look back. No lingering messages, no checking in, no emotional breadcrumbs. You left them with silence. And silence doesn't negotiate. Silence doesn't explain. Silence doesn't comfort. Silence just confirms that the decision is final. They didn't expect you to value your future more than your past. Most people cling to what they've already built, even if it's broken. You chose what you could still build. That choice takes courage, and clarity scares people who live on habit. They keep replaying the blink. The moment they realized they no longer had access. 1 second they were familiar. The next, they were outsiders. That sudden shift forces reflection they've been avoiding for years. They ask themselves if you ever cared. The answer scares them, yes, deeply, and you still left. That means caring isn't enough when respect is gone. That means love doesn't override self-worth. That means they can't rely on emotional history to protect them from consequences anymore. They're shocked because your departure wasn't fueled by hatred. Hatred would have tied you to them longer. You left because you were done. Being done is quieter and far more unsettling. They never thought you'd be the one to end it so cleanly. They assumed you'd stay loyal to the memory of who they used to be. You chose to respond to who they became. That choice dismantled every excuse they leaned on. They tell themselves they deserve more warning. They ignore the warnings you gave through changed behavior, reduced effort, emotional distance. Warnings don't always come as ultimatums. Sometimes they come as silence. Sometimes they come as withdrawal. Sometimes they come as you watching instead of reacting. They missed all of them. Now they're left with shock. Because shock is what happens when people realize too late that access is a privilege, not a right. You didn't erase the history. You honored it by refusing to let it justify your suffering. You understood that the past should inform decisions, not imprison them. And once you saw that clearly, leaving didn't require drama, it required honesty. They'll tell the story differently. They'll say you changed overnight. They'll say you were cold. They'll say the cut was sudden. Let them. Stories help people sleep when truth keeps them awake. You know what really happened. You reached a point where staying required betraying yourself, and you chose yourself without hesitation. That's why they're shocked, because they expected history to own you, and instead, you proved that history doesn't control the future. Clarity does. They keep talking, but the sound never reaches you. Words move from their mouths with urgency, desperation, apology, but none of it lands. It's like watching lips move behind soundproof glass. You see the effort. You don't feel the meaning. They explain and explain, layering justification on top of regret, hoping one sentence might finally pierce through the distance you've built. What drives them mad is realizing that distance isn't argumentative. It doesn't debate. It doesn't respond. There was a time when one careless word from them could keep you awake all night. Now entire speeches dissolve without impact. That contrast alone terrifies them. They keep trying to correct the past with language, as if explanation were a time machine, as if interpretation could undo impact. But you don't live in their narrative anymore. They think if they just clarify enough, soften the tone enough, rearrange the facts enough, you will finally react. They don't understand that reaction is no longer part of your process. They mistake your silence for thinking. You are not thinking. You are finished. They keep adding context. You stopped needing context the moment the pattern became clear. They keep explaining intent. You stopped caring about intent when the results kept looking the same. They keep offering reasons. You already accepted truth. They talk as if you're still emotionally present in the room. They don't realize you left long ago and only your body attended the ending. They defend themselves with trembling logic, stitching narratives where they were confused, overwhelmed, misunderstood. They cannot accept the version where they were simply wrong. You are not resisting their words. You are immune to them. They don't know what unsettles them more, your lack of anger or your lack of engagement. At least anger would confirm you are still emotionally reachable. They speak faster now, sensing the gap widening with every sentence. They panic in their explanations the way people panic when they feel something slipping beyond retrieval. They keep circling the same points, polishing old excuses, replaying old motives with new packaging. They don't see that your detachment is not refusing to understand, it's refusing to care. They ask if you're listening. You don't answer. Not because you're confused, but because the question no longer applies. They still believe if they can just make you see, everything might reset. They haven't realized that seeing is exactly what ended it. You don't interrupt. You don't correct them. You don't argue facts. You simply don't participate. And that emptiness frightens them more than confrontation ever did. They explain because explaining once worked. Because your empathy used to soften their accountability. Because your heart used to stay open long enough for them to reshape the story. Now the story falls into a void. They feel like they're screaming into a canyon that returns no echo. They try sincerity next. Softer voice, slower words, care carefully injected into every sentence. They are trying a new key in a lock that no longer exists. They don't understand how someone who once over-listened, over-felt, over-cared can now sit through explanations without absorbing a single syllable. What they don't grasp is that detachment doesn't switch off hearing. It switches off relevance. You hear sounds. You don't hear meaning. They get defensive when your face doesn't change. They accuse you of being cold, of being unfair, of being impossible to reach, never questioning why they were once so easily heard. They think you're punishing them with silence. They don't understand silence stopped being strategy and became state. They want a verdict. You gave them distance. They want absolution. You gave them nothing. They want resolution. You gave them removal. They talk louder now, hoping volume will substitute for importance. It doesn't. They start repeating themselves as if repetition can create significance where significance has already died. They notice your eyes no longer search theirs for truth. That breaks something inside them. You used to need their explanations. Now you don't even verify them. They keep explaining because they need to rescue their self-image, not because they need your forgiveness. You stop believing apologies that arrive only after power is lost. They realize, slowly, that they are not speaking to a wounded heart anymore, but to a sealed door. They try guilt next, then nostalgia, then responsibility, then denial, then remorse. Every emotional currency they once spent successfully now has zero value. They get frantic when they notice your breathing is steady. No trembling, no visible conflict. Calm becomes the most terrifying response they've ever met. They want to provoke something, anything. Even hatred would feel better than this absence of reaction. They explain and explain because they can't accept that the last thing you needed from them was more words. They haven't realized yet that your detachment is not built on misunderstanding. It is built on understanding too clearly. They talk because they are still inside the emotional storm. You sit outside it. They speak because they still want control over the meaning of what happened. You stop negotiating meaning. They accuse you of shutting down. They don't see that what shut down was the part of you willing to absorb damage for the sake of connection. They are terrified by how calm you are while they unravel in justification. They explain themselves because they are still trying to survive the aftermath. You already did. They think your silence means there's hope if they just keep talking. What they don't know is that you are not holding your words back. You simply have none left for them. They keep explaining because they cannot process an ending that doesn't include their narrative. You detached because you finally chose an ending that doesn't require their permission. They wanted you to hear them. What they never prepared for was becoming someone you no longer listened to at all. They kept explaining themselves. You didn't hear a word, not because you were hurt, but because they were no longer worthy of your attention. And that is the most final form of detachment there is. They eventually realize that the more they explain, the more invisible they feel. Every sentence they offer falls into the same quiet space where their importance used to live. They speak, but nothing echoes back. And people are not built to survive without echoes. They start measuring their worth by your reaction, and there is none. No anger to validate their impact. No tears to confirm their importance. Just your steady calm, which quietly tells them they no longer exist where it once mattered most. They remember when you used to beg for clarity, when you used to chase understanding, when your heart needed their words like oxygen. Now they are suffocating under the weight of words you don't even need anymore. They try to remind you of everything you shared, hoping memory will reopen the door. They don't understand that memory was the lesson it taught you exactly why the door had to stay closed. They accuse you of being cruel for not listening. They never accuse themselves for teaching you that listening only meant being heard more efficiently. They keep explaining because explanation gives them the illusion of control. As long as they are talking, they believe the ending is still negotiable. Your silence tells them the negotiation ended before they even realized it began. They feel powerless in front of your detachment because they can no longer shape how you see them. Their image is no longer in their hands. It sits quietly in your decision, and decisions don't argue. They replay their speeches in their heads afterward, rewriting what they should have said better, softer, smarter, as if a perfected apology could travel back in time and find a heart that already moved on. They are haunted by how present you look while being emotionally absent from them. It confuses their instincts. Every signal they once relied on no longer applies. They expected to be forgiven or hated. They never expected to be irrelevant. And irrelevance is the one outcome they have no emotional language for. They used to live inside your reactions. Now they are locked outside of your indifference, knocking with explanations that no longer translate into meaning. The most painful part for them is not that you stopped listening, it's that you stopped needing to. They wanted their words to save them. They didn't realize the moment words needed to save them was the exact moment they stopped mattering. They will spend a long time talking about you in rooms you'll never enter again, trying to rebuild a version of themselves that doesn't look so small in your silence. And finally, they will have to face the truth that no explanation can survive. You didn't stop listening because you misunderstood. You stopped listening because you understood everything too clearly. They kept explaining themselves because they still needed an ending that made them feel whole. You detached because you chose an ending that made you whole. They kept talking. You stopped hearing. And that is where the story truly, completely, permanently ends. They thought they knew you. They thought every layer was mapped, every reaction predictable, every breaking point memorized. What they were not prepared for was the version of you that no longer performs for their understanding. This version doesn't announce growth. It doesn't seek validation. It doesn't demand acknowledgement. It simply exists, and that quiet confidence unsettles them more than confrontation ever did. They keep trying to reconcile the old you with the present you, like two images that refuse to overlap. The kindness they once exploited now stands behind boundaries they can't cross. They expected evolution to keep your softness. What they got instead was precision. They were ready for your anger. They were ready for your sorrow. They were even ready for your revenge. They were not ready for your self-command. You don't prove yourself anymore. And that change alone dismantles the hierarchy they thought they stood on. They still talk as if their influence defines you. What ruins their sleep is realizing your power no longer references them at all. They look for cracks that used to exist. They find armor instead. They expect emotional availability. They meet emotional sovereignty. They thought confidence would make you loud. It made you unbothered. They thought strength would make you aggressive. It made you unreachable. They are unsettled by how calm you are with your own authority. You don't ask permission to take up space in your own life anymore. They feel the shift in rooms before they understand it. Conversations pause, eyes adjust, The energy recalibrates around you without your consent or request. They used to feel taller around you, now they feel exposed. They remember when they could shake you with words. Now they measure their speech, unsure which version of you they are speaking to and afraid of provoking the wrong one. This version of you doesn't defend. It observes. It doesn't chase. It chooses. It doesn't collapse. It calculates. They are disturbed by how little you need from them now. Dependency once comforted them. Independence disorients them. They thought they were the standard you measured yourself against. What bends their pride is learning they were only a phase you outgrew. They don't know how to compete with a person who isn't competing at all. Your presence no longer seeks approval, and approval was the last leverage they had. They try to humble you with memories of who you used to be. They don't realize those memories are the exact reason this version was born. They feel irrelevant standing next to your certainty, not because you diminish them, but because you no longer adjust yourself to accommodate their insecurity. They look for hesitation. They find resolve. They look for doubt. They find alignment. They look for the old openings. They find closed systems. They weren't ready for a you who doesn't romanticize struggle anymore. They weren't ready for a you who doesn't confuse intensity with truth. They weren't ready for a you who moves without needing applause. They still live inside the version of you they could manipulate. That world no longer exists. They expected your growth to remain familiar. It didn't. They expected your confidence to be loud enough to mock. It's too silent to touch. They expected your power to need explanation. It doesn't. They feel disarmed by the way you no longer over-explain your decisions. You don't justify departures. You don't narrate peace. They thought your softness made you safe. They didn't consider what happens when softness becomes selective. They fear this version because it can't be guilted back into old patterns. They fear this version because it walks away without announcing exits. They fear this version because it doesn't seek emotional refunds. They fear this version because it remembers everything and still moves forward without bitterness. They try to provoke reactions to confirm you're still reachable. You remain uninterested in being confirmed. They tell themselves you're pretending. They need that belief to survive the truth that you are realer than ever. They don't know how to interact with someone who is no longer emotionally negotiable. They feel destabilized by your steadiness. Your calm interrupts their chaos. They thought your evolution would keep them included. What destabilizes them is realizing growth doesn't offer honorary seats. They weren't ready for a you that no longer shrinks to preserve comfort in others. They weren't ready for a you that chooses ease over endurance. They weren't ready for a you that learned self-respect without losing compassion, but also without giving access. They wanted you powerful but still approachable on their terms. You became powerful on your own. They wanted you healed, but still available to old wounds. You healed in a direction that didn't point back. They weren't ready for a you that doesn't seek closure, they seek forward motion. They weren't ready for a you that doesn't ask, "Is this okay?" They weren't ready for a you that no longer waits to be chosen. This version of you doesn't announce arrival. It simply rearranges the room. And that's why it messes with their head. Because everything they used to rely on to predict you is gone. Because their old power only worked on the old you. Because your silence now carries authority. Because your calm now contains decision. Because your absence now has permanence. They weren't ready for this version because this version no longer needs their permission to exist. They weren't ready for this version because this version doesn't look back. They weren't ready for this version because this version ended their influence without confrontation. They weren't ready for how little they matter to this version. They weren't ready for the kind of power that doesn't threaten. It simply moves on. And that is why this version of you lives rent-free in their mind. Not because you attacked, not because you destroyed, but because you evolved so completely that their reality can't keep up with your direction anymore. And that is the most unsettling kind of dominance there is. They try to pretend they're unfazed, but the change in you unsettles them in ways they can't disguise. Your confidence no longer seeks mirrors in their approval, and that robs them of the role they once played in your reflection. They keep waiting for the old triggers to work: the guilt, the nostalgia, the confusion, but none of it lands. It's like pressing buttons on a machine that has already been powered down. They sense that your peace isn't fragile anymore. It doesn't wobble when tested. It doesn't bend to pressure. It simply holds. And that kind of stability unnerves people who relied on your little cracks. They thought your growth would still orbit them. What bends their pride is realizing your life has found a center that doesn't include their gravity. They replay memories, trying to anchor you back to who you were. They don't understand that memory no longer has permission to trespass in your present. They assumed your softness would always be accessible. They were not prepared for what happens when softness becomes guarded by self-respect instead of hope. They keep checking for emotional reactions, like someone tapping glass to see if it's real. Your stillness confirms it is, and that confirmation scares them. They feel like they lost a version of you they believed they owned. They hadn't realized it was always borrowed. They struggle with the idea that your power now comes without noise, loud strength they could challenge. Quiet strength leaves them nowhere to strike. They expected your confidence to need witnesses, but yours doesn't perform, it doesn't persuade, it doesn't recruit. It simply moves as if doubt no longer has citizenship in your decisions. They try to understand when control slipped from their hands. The truth unsettles them most. Control didn't slip, it was returned permanently. They speak about you with confusion now, not authority. The tone has shifted from "I know them" to "I don't recognize them." And that loss of certainty breaks something in their pride. They once believed they shaped you. What shakes them now is realizing pressure shaped you into someone they can't reach. They expected your growth to still seek their validation. What confuses them is how effortlessly you stopped seeking anything from them at all. They feel outpaced, not because you rushed ahead, but because you no longer slowed down to keep them comfortable. They tell themselves you're just playing a role. They need that belief to survive the idea that this version of you is permanent. They were ready for your success. They were not ready for your independence. They were ready for your healing. They were not ready for your boundaries. They were ready for your confidence. They were not ready for your non-negotiables. They built their comfort on the assumption that you would always be reachable. What's breaking their mind now is realizing you didn't become unreachable out of spite. You became unreachable out of alignment. And here is the ending they will wrestle with in silence. You didn't change to intimidate them. You didn't grow to prove anything. You didn't evolve to make a statement. They are losing their minds not because the bond ended, but because of how it ended. A connection that once felt unbreakable didn't collapse in chaos. It dissolved in silence. And silence is the one ending they cannot analyze, debate, or reverse. What unsettles them most is not that you left. It's that nothing dramatic followed. No accusations, no public unraveling, no emotional wreckage for them to point at and say, "See? It mattered. You detached so cleanly. It feels unreal in hindsight." They remember how intense the bond once was, how deeply you showed up, how thoroughly you were woven into their everyday lives. And now that absence feels unnatural, like a limb missing without pain to explain it. They expected grief to look loud. Instead, it looks like distance. It looks like composure. It looks like someone who reached the end of their emotional endurance without announcing it. They revisit old moments, trying to locate the fracture. They replay laughter, memories, promises. They search desperately for the exact second where warmth turned into withdrawal. What they never find is a single moment, only a pattern they ignored. They thought the depth of the bond guaranteed permanence. They believed history itself would protect them from consequences. They never imagined that love could expire quietly once it was repeatedly disrespected. They are haunted by how normal your life seems now, how intact your days look, how easily your world adjusted to their absence. That normalcy feels like betrayal to them, like proof that the bond mattered less to you than it did to them. But the truth is harsher. The bond mattered so much that it taught you what you refused to tolerate again. They wait for signs of longing, for cracks of nostalgia, for moments where you slip back into a familiar softness. What drives them mad is how consistently those moments never arrive. They still feel the emotional cord. You don't. They still live inside the echo of what was. You live inside what is. They believe the bond gave them permanent emotional access to you. They never realized access is not owned, it is granted, and it can be revoked without permission. Your detachment is not dramatic. It doesn't seek attention. It doesn't perform indifference. It simply exists as fact, and facts are terrifying when people were depending on fantasy. They cannot tell if you are angry, healed, numb, or just done. The uncertainty eats at them. When someone detaches without blame, there is no villain to fight, only loss to face. They would rather you hate them. Hate still connects. Hate still proves emotional relevance. Your detachment proves something far worse, that they no longer reach you at all. They tell themselves you will come back to the bond eventually, that habits return, that history has gravity. They don't understand that boundaries have gravity too. They remember the version of you that stayed, explained, waited, forgave. They don't recognize the version of you that simply leaves quietly and never circles back. They feel erased from a chapter they thought defined them. They don't understand how someone who once loved deeply can now withdraw completely. What they fail to accept is that deep love is exactly what taught you how to detach when it became unsafe. Your silence does not invite dialogue. Your distance does not request interpretation. It just closes the emotional door without a speech. They are driven mad by the lack of leverage. They cannot provoke jealousy. They cannot trigger arguments. They cannot manipulate regret. The emotional hooks they once relied on find nothing to catch. They try to remind you of everything you shared. They don't realize that memory is not a contract. It is a lesson. They cannot comprehend how bonded hearts become unreachable bodies. They don't understand that detachment is not forgetting. It is refusing to bleed where the wound keeps reopening. They look for themselves inside you and panic when they can't find their reflection anymore. They feel small standing next to your quiet composure, not because you speak louder, but because you no longer explain. They thought damage would create dependency. It created escape. They believed the depth of the bond would override the cost of their behavior. It only clarified it. They are tormented by the way your detachment does not seek revenge. Revenge would mean you still care how they feel. Your indifference confirms the opposite. They wonder how long you were preparing to leave emotionally before you did physically. They replay every moment now with suspicion. They are driven mad by the idea that your detachment did not start when the bond ended, but when the bond began to hurt. They fear they were replaceable in a story they believed they owned. They want to be missed loudly. You miss privately or not at all. They want proof that they mattered enough to fracture you. You never gave them that satisfaction. They want an emotional reaction they can interpret as power. They received peace instead. And nothing makes people more unstable than watching someone they once had completely become unreachable without hostility. The bond they still romanticize is now the reason your boundaries exist. Your detachment is not cold because you lacked feeling. It is cold because the feeling was exhausted. And that is why it drives them mad. Because they are haunted not by what you did to them, but by what you quietly refuse to keep doing to yourself. They lie awake at night replaying versions of you that no longer exist, trying to stitch old warmth onto a present that refuses to thaw. They reach for memories the way people reach for ghosts out of habit, not hope. They don't miss the bond the way you experienced it. They miss the version of the bond where your presence made their life easier, softer, safer. They miss the benefits, not the responsibility. They try to convince themselves that your detachment is temporary, that silence is just a phase. They cling to the idea of your return because accepting your permanence would mean accepting their loss. They scroll through past conversations like sacred texts, trying to decode where they went wrong, as if the answer isn't stitched clearly into every boundary you were forced to build. They imagine what they would say if you ever spoke again. Full speeches, full confessions, full apologies polished with hindsight. What unravels them is knowing those words no longer have an audience. They wonder how it's possible that you once needed them and now don't even acknowledge their emotional gravity. That shift bends their sense of reality. They feel rejected on a level deeper than abandonment because abandonment still implies attachment. What you gave them was disconnection. They tell themselves you're pretending, that your strength is a performance. They need that lie to survive because the truth that you are genuinely at peace without them is unbearable. They look for signs of regret in your life. They search your growth for evidence that leaving them cost you something. What they keep finding instead is stability. They hoped your world would shrink after the bond collapsed. Watching it expand without them fractures their pride in quiet, merciless ways. They want you to still be shaped by what you shared. They don't realize the bond shaped you into someone who no longer needs conditions to choose themselves. They want to believe your detachment is punishment, because punishment still centers them. They cannot accept that your detachment is freedom. They dread the possibility that you didn't just move on from them, but move beyond the version of yourself that ever accepted that bond at all. They feel replaced without being replaced, displaced without another name to blame, outgrown without a rival to fight. They keep waiting for the emotional earthquake everyone promises comes after deep connection ends. What drives them mad is realizing you already survived it privately. They thought the bond made them irreplaceable. What they are learning now is that nothing is irreplaceable when it becomes unsafe. They believe the depth of your connection guaranteed your return. They didn't know depth can also teach someone exactly how to disappear. And now comes the part they will never fully recover from: the understanding that your detachment is not built on anger, punishment, or regret. It is built on decision. You didn't drift away. You chose distance. You chose peace. You chose the version of yourself that no longer needs to be held hostage by memory. They are going mad because they are stuck in what was, while you live fully inside what is. They romanticize the bond because it comforts them. You remember the cost because it freed you. They are haunted by your absence. You are protected by it. And that is the final blow to their sanity. You didn't detach to hurt them. You detached to save yourself. You didn't sever the bond out of cruelty. You severed it out of clarity. You didn't leave to be remembered. You left to be whole. And the most devastating truth they will ever face is this: the bond they are still grieving is the exact reason you will never return. And that is the end of their madness, and the beginning of your unshakable peace. Truth surfaced. They expected an explosion when the truth surfaced. They expected shock, screaming, exposure, emotional chaos. What they were not prepared for was the absence of reaction, the stillness that followed the betrayal like a closed door instead of a battlefield. They rehearsed your reaction in their heads. They planned for anger. They braced for confrontation. They even prepared themselves to feel powerful watching you unravel. What terrified them instead was how little it seemed to touch you on the surface. They mistook your calm for ignorance at first. Surely you didn't know yet. Surely the silence meant delay. Surely the storm would arrive eventually. But the storm never came, and that unsettled them in ways they could not explain. They expected you to bleed where they cut. They expected evidence of impact. What they got was composure. And composure is the one thing betrayal never accounts for. They confused your lack of reaction with weakness. They didn't realize it was calculation. You didn't confront because confrontation still gives oxygen to the offense. You didn't accuse because accusation still grants the traitor relevance. You chose the one response they could never manipulate: detachment. They waited for you to lash out. You reorganized your life instead. They waited for rage. You chose silence. They waited for revenge. You chose erasure. And now they are scared. They are scared because people who don't react emotionally cannot be predicted. They are scared because they no longer know where they stand with you. They are scared because your stillness feels final. They thought being snaked would provoke desperation. They didn't understand that desperation only lives where hope still survives. You had already buried hope before the betrayal ever made itself visible. They study your behavior now like a puzzle with missing pieces. They overanalyze your tone, your timing, your absence. They are trying to locate the emotional damage they assumed must be there. What they cannot accept is that you already processed the betrayal before they ever saw your awareness of it. You didn't react because your reaction already happened privately. Pain already did its work. Disappointment already burned its path. Trust already left without ceremony. By the time the truth reached them, it was already old news to your nervous system. They are scared because you didn't expose them. You didn't validate the betrayal by dramatizing it. You didn't give them the satisfaction of watching your world shake. They wanted to feel the weight of their impact on you. Instead, they felt invisible. There is nothing more unsettling to a betrayer than discovering their betrayal did not make them important. They whisper your name now with caution. They speak about you with uncertainty. They don't know whether they should fear your return or accept your disappearance, and that ambiguity tortures them. They are used to consequences that scream. Yours arrived as silence, and silence leaves no instructions for how to respond. They thought you would try to defend your dignity. They didn't realize you protected it by removing the audience entirely. They anticipated a performance. You gave them closure without confession. They assumed betrayal would bind you emotionally, even through anger. What surprised them was how cleanly you cut the emotional cord without noise. You became unreadable to them, and unreadable people feel dangerous to those who depend on manipulation. They expected you to demand explanations. You already understood the motive. They expected you to ask, why? You already knew who. They waited for you to expose the knife in their hand. You simply stepped away from the blade and let them stand alone with it. They fear you now not because you threaten them, but because you don't. Your lack of reaction removed their leverage. It removed the story they planned to tell about you being too emotional. It removed the role they wanted you to play in justifying themselves. Now they are left with themselves, and that is uncomfortable. They keep replaying the moment you found out, searching your face for the crack that never showed. They are haunted by the calm you wore like armor. They don't trust your quiet because it doesn't beg for reconciliation. It doesn't threaten retaliation. It simply ends access. They are used to people reacting loudly so they can feel the center of the scene. You denied them that center. They are scared because your detachment feels irreversible. They expected betrayal to make you smaller. Instead, it made you sharper. They thought you would collapse into self-doubt. Instead, you collapsed inward, rebuilt quietly, and emerged without needing their witness. They whisper that you're cold now. They don't realize cold is what remains when someone stops bleeding in public. They worry about what you might do. What they never expected is that what you chose to do was leave emotionally without ceremony. They wanted your heartbreak to tether you to them. Your non-reaction cut the tether entirely. They are scared because they cannot measure their influence on you anymore. They are scared because you didn't need justice to move on. They are scared because you didn't need revenge to feel whole. They are scared because you didn't even need closure. You didn't react not because the betrayal didn't hurt, but because, by the time it surfaced, you had already chosen yourself over the explanation. They mistook your silence for confusion. It was resolution. They mistook your calm for delay. It was departure. They mistook your lack of reaction for weakness. It was the final proof that they no longer mattered enough to disturb your peace. They snaked you. You didn't even flinch. And that is what will haunt them the longest. They begin to realize the most unsettling part is not what you did, but what you refused to do. You didn't beg for the truth. You didn't chase the lie. You didn't demand loyalty from people who already proved they had none. You simply let the revelation pass through you like confirmation instead of catastrophe. They expected the betrayal to become the center of your life. What shattered them is watching it become a footnote. They tell themselves that your calm must be an act, that no one stays that composed after being cut that deep. They hope secretly that you're breaking in private. They want to believe they still have some emotional footprint left inside you. But time keeps proving otherwise. Your life does not slow down, your focus does not fracture, your peace does not return with conditions. The world does not collapse around the moment they thought would define you. And that confuses them more than any confrontation ever could. They don't understand how betrayal didn't turn you bitter. They don't understand how you can walk forward without dragging the wound behind you as an identity. They cannot comprehend healing that doesn't require public suffering. They keep waiting for the delayed reaction. Surely it will come. Surely the calm is only shock. Surely the grief will surface eventually. But shock does not last this long. And grief does not look this quiet when it is still alive. They feel exposed now, not because you told anyone, but because your silence leaves their actions naked without commentary. There is no spin, no counter-narrative, no emotional smoke to hide inside. Just the truth standing alone. They wanted control over the aftermath. They wanted to manage your response the way they managed the betrayal. But control depends on reaction, and you gave them none. They feel watched by your absence, judged by your peace, condemned by the fact that your life looks lighter without them in it. They thought your trust was a weakness they could exploit without consequence. What they discovered too late is that trust, once withdrawn, does not beg to be restored. They begin to understand that some people don't get loud when they are done. They get unreachable. They try to explain your silence as immaturity, arrogance, emotional shutdown. They will call it anything except what it truly is: finality. They remember how you used to explain yourself, how you used to fight to be understood, how you used to stay even when staying hurt. They don't recognize the person who no longer performs those rituals. They are scared because they cannot tell where your boundaries are anymore, and people fear what they cannot map. They try to bait a reaction with reminders of the past, with staged remorse, with subtle threats, with emotional nostalgia disguised as concern. None of it lands. Every attempt dissolves quietly in your indifference, and that makes them feel small. They were prepared for conflict. They were prepared for damage control. They were prepared for chaos. They were not prepared for someone who simply disengages without asking to be understood. They begin to suspect that your reactionlessness was not shock but strength, that you did not freeze because you were overwhelmed. You froze because you had already decided. They wonder how long you knew, how long you carried the truth without signaling it. That realization unnerves them, the thought that you were already gone emotionally while they still thought the game was running. They wanted to see you wounded. Instead, they watched you become inaccessible. They wanted to feel powerful over your pain. Instead, they felt irrelevant to your peace.